Welcome back to Killer Stories. I'm your host, Bobbie Holmes. I have some exciting things to talk to you guys about. First, I hope you were all able to listen to my joint episode with Stuart Blues on his podcast last week. I told the story of Charles Albright, aka the Eyeball Killer. If you missed it, find British Murders on your favorite podcast platform and look for the Killer British Murder Stories Volume 1. Secondly, there's a new way to help support the show. Killer Stories has merch. I've got tank tops, t-shirts, hoodies, mugs, and stickers. I got myself the red hoodie and a sticker for my car. I'm so excited to show it off. In the show notes, I have my link tree where you can find the merch website as well as the links for all my social media and multiple ways to listen to the show. But I'll go ahead and tell you the website to shop now. It's Teespring, teespring.com/stores/killer with a D stories podcast. So that's teespring.com/stores/killer stories podcast. One more thing. I started uploading my content to YouTube. My channel is Killer Stories Podcast. As for now, it's just the audio set to a photo. It's a process, but I have about half of my existing episodes uploaded. But I'm hoping at some point to make some recording videos as well. Okay, it's finally time to get to the good stuff. This week, I have another listener story suggestion. This one comes from a local, Ashton Dayton of Ogden, Utah. She wrote me a few months ago telling me she had been obsessed with this case for years and thinks it would be perfect for Killer Stories. I sat on it a while because I had recently covered quite a few Utah cases, but here we are back to Utah discussing the HiFi murders. This incident took place April 22nd, 1974 in the city of Ogden. Ogden has a stigma of not being the safest of cities. Don't get me wrong, I love Ogden. It's definitely turning around. Even since we just moved here in 2017, it's dramatically changing. Ogden has a history of prostitution, violence, and criminal activity like bootlegging booze. Legend has it that Al Capone got off the train on 25th Street, Ogden, and said it was too rough of a place for him and left. In the 70s, there was a lot of gang activity and shootings. Well, at least on historic 25th Street near the train station. The HiFi store was located on Washington Boulevard, one of the main drags in Ogden. It's an audio store, like Radio Shack. It stood for high fidelity, quote, the high-quality reproduction of sound, unquote. The night of April 22nd, there were two people working at the HiFi store, 18-year-old Sherry Michelle Ainsley, who went by Michelle, and 20-year-old Stanley Walker. Michelle was recently engaged to be married. Her wedding was just 4 months away. She got a job at the HiFi store to start saving up money. At this point, she had only been working there about 1 week. That evening, when it was almost time to close, Michelle and Stanley were getting ready to start the end-of-day routines when 3 men walked in. As they approached the counter, all 3 men pull out handguns. 2 of the men, Dale Selby Pierre and William Andrews, forced the workers to the basement at gunpoint where they were bound and gagged. The men began taking audio equipment out to their getaway vehicle. There were more men waiting outside in a van. At this time, 16-year-old Courtney Nasbitt was going to run some errands nearby. He parked in the HiFi parking lot and popped inside to tell his friend Stanley that he was doing so. To his surprise, he walked into an active robbery. Courtney was also taken hostage and joined Michelle and Stanley in the basement. Stanley was 20 years old, but he was still living at home with his parents. When he didn't come home at his normal time and there was no answer when calling the store, his father, Orrin Walker, came looking for him. When he arrived, the men robbing the store took 43-year-old Orrin hostage as well. This must have been a pretty leisurely robbery. Enough time passed that Orrin was worried about Stanley and came searching for him. And before too long, Carol Nasbitt showed up looking for her son, Courtney. and you guessed it, she was taken to the basement where she was also bound and gagged. So let's go over all the hostages. We have Michelle and Stanley, the two who were working at the HiFi store that night, Courtney, who was running errands, Stanley's dad, and Courtney's mom. 5 people lying on a cold basement floor, hands and feet tied together, their mouths stuffed full to muffle their screams. Dale Pierre seemed to be the ringleader of this robbery. He stayed with the hostages while William Andrews went upstairs. He came back down with a brown paper bag. He poured a thick blue liquid from the bag into a glass. The 2 men tried to get Orrin to take charge distributing the drinks, but he refused. He had no idea what this blue stuff was, and he wasn't going to endanger the others. Dale and William take each one of the hostages and prop them up against the wall. They remove their gags and force them to drink the blue liquid. They were told it was vodka laced with sleeping pills. As soon as they took a sip of the liquid, they instantly got sick and began vomiting. I had a similar reaction to Blue Wave vodka in college, but it turns out this wasn't vodka at all. It was actually Drano, commercial grade Drano. It was so strong it instantly created blisters on the hostages' lips, and I can only imagine the internal damage it caused. After the first attempt failed, the men forced them to drink more and duct taped their mouths shut. But the tape wasn't sticking very well to their faces due to the open, seeping blisters that formed around their mouths. Dale and William thought they were pretty slick. They recently watched a movie called Magnum Force where a woman was forced to drink Drano and boom, fell over dead. Well, that's not how it actually works. It may kill you, but it won't be quick, and they were screaming and writhing in agony. The deaths were taking too long for Dale. He shot Courtney and his mother Carol in the back of the head. Then he turned and shot at Orrin, but missed. Stanley showed emotion when they shot at his father, causing Dale to switch gears. He shot and killed Stanley. He shot at Orrin again, making contact with the back of his head, but the shot was not fatal. For whatever reason, Michelle was not forced to drink the Drano. I guess they had other plans for her. Dale drug her over to the corner of the basement where he untied her and commanded her at gunpoint to remove her clothes. He raped her over and over. William just sat and watched while his buddy sexually assaulted the 18-year-old. When Dale was finished with Michelle, he picked her up and threw her down on the ground. He shot her in the back of the head at point-blank range. Dale and William discover that Orrin is actually still alive. William grabs a wire and wraps it tightly around his neck, attempting to strangle him. Either they have no idea what they are doing, or maybe just Orrin had a strong will to live, but the strangulation plan failed. William and Dale grabbed a pen. And this part makes me cringe. They forcefully shoved the pen into Orrin's ear, puncturing his eardrum. Dale stepped on the pen until it came out the side of his neck. They assume Orrin is going to die from his injuries, or perhaps he decided to play dead at this point. Dale and William finish loading the van with stolen equipment and take off. The part that's confusing me about this case is that I keep reading there were 6 men involved in the robbery. But the only men named were Dale Pierre, William Andrews, and the driver, Keith Roberts. Who was the 3rd man that entered the store with Dale and William? And who else is in the van waiting with Keith? And what the hell does Keith think is happening in there? Usually you need a getaway driver to escape fast. It sounds like this lasted quite a long time. All while Keith is just chilling out there in the van with 2 other accomplices. A few hours later, Orrin's wife and son came to the store looking for him and Stanley. They enter the store and hear noises coming from the basement. Their son had to kick the door down. There he saw the disturbing scene of 5 people covered with blood, blue goo, and vomit. He yelled up for his mother to hurry and call 911. When police and EMS arrived, Michelle and Stanley were pronounced dead at the scene. Miraculously, Carol, Courtney, and Orrin were all still alive. Orrin was in really bad shape. Not only did he have a gunshot to the head, a pen punctured through his ear and protruding out of his neck, but he also had severe burns in his esophagus and stomach. He pulled through and ended up surviving this horrific event. Carol was put on a gurney and hauled off in an ambulance, but by the time the ambulance arrived to the hospital, she had died. Courtney was in a coma for 28 days. He survived but has brain damage from being shot in the head. Even with his handicap, he was able to graduate high school and continue on to get his pilot's license. But he lived with a lot of physical and emotional pain from the event. Friends and family said he was never the same. The morning after the murders, police received a phone call from an officer at Hill Air Force Base. He was calling to report a tip. The officer said that William had told him a few weeks prior, quote, "One of these days I'm going to rob that HiFi shop, and if anyone gets in my way, I'm going to kill them," unquote. So kudos to that officer for making that phone call, but I'm going to be a little judgy here. It would have been a good idea to report this when the comment was made, before the crimes could be committed. I'm sure he thought William was blowing smoke, and I bet the guilt of holding back that info is what prompted him to call the police as soon as he heard about the news of the robbery. Because of this tip, the police already had one suspect in mind. They received another call from a group of teenagers who were dumpster diving in the garbage right outside of the Air Force Base. They found wallets and purses. Inside were the IDs of the hostages that had been all over the news that morning. Police arrived to comb through the trash closer and make sure they weren't overlooking any evidence. The presence of police on base had everyone curious. The airmen formed a crowd to see what was going on. Everyone stood still at attention and watched as the cops dug through the trash, except for two men who were anxiously pacing back and forth, Dale Pierre and William Andrews. Like I said, investigators already had their eye on William. Due to their strange reaction at the dumpster, they had William and Dale's barracks searched. They found a flyer advertisement for the HiFi store. There was also paperwork for a storage space rental. Dale and William were taken into custody while they investigated further. The storage facility was full of audio equipment. It wasn't hard to track it back to the HiFi store using the serial numbers. Further incriminating the two, the half-empty bottle of Drano was also in the storage unit. There was a joint trial implicating Dale Pierre, William Andrews, and Keith Roberts of their crimes. Dale and William were charged with 3 counts of aggravated murder, while Keith was only charged with the robbery. Keith, who was only 19 years old at the time of the crime, was sentenced to 5 years to life. He ended up serving 13 years in prison. Dale was born in Trinidad and moved to New York City when he was 17. He enlisted in the Air Force as a helicopter mechanic and was shipped to Hill Air Force Base. He was just 21 years old when the murders occurred. He had actually already been accused of murder once before. Edward Jefferson, a sergeant at Hill Air Force Base, was found murdered in his apartment. Apparently, Dale was at Edward's apartment one evening taping music. But remember, this is the 70s. I'm not sure how they did it then, but I remember holding my tape recorder next to the radio and recording the songs. Terrible quality, but hey, it's what I had to work with at the time. After Dale left, Edward wasn't able to find his car keys. He searched his apartment up and down, but they were nowhere to be found. The next day, they appeared on the table. Edward was immediately suspicious of Dale because he was the only other person in his apartment around the time they went missing. What actually happened was Dale took the keys to make duplicates, most likely part of a plan to steal his car. When the dupes were made, the name Curtis Alexander was signed as a cover. Edward changed the locks to his apartment and the ignition of his car. Then he confronted Dale, who of course denied any involvement. Then Edward was found in his apartment murdered with a bayonet. It was plunged into his head, leaving only the handle exposed. Edward had shared his suspicions of Dale being responsible for swiping his keys, leading investigators to target him as their prime suspect. But there was no evidence to prove it. At the time of the HiFi murders, Dale was actually out on bail for another crime. He had stolen a car from a Salt Lake City car dealership. So it's safe to say that Dale Pierre was a bad dude. I can't believe he was allowed to stay in the Air Force and live on base after being the suspect in the murder of a sergeant and going to jail for car theft. Dale Pierre was sentenced to death by lethal injection for the murders of Michelle Ainsley, Stanley Walker, and Carol Nesbitt. His last words were, quote, "I'll be glad when this is over," unquote. Fun fact, he left all of his money to his buddy William Andrews, a whopping $29. 5 years later, William was also sentenced to death by lethal injection for his part in the murders. The sentencing of William Andrews was more controversial. It was argued that he didn't actually murder anyone. Dale Pierre was the only one who shot the victims, but William did force the hostages to drink the Drano. And he was the one saying he planned to rob the store and kill anyone in his way to the Air Force officer. The controversy was more about race. The final report stated that there were 6 black men in 2 different vans who participated in the robbery. However, only 3 were ever identified and convicted. The others got away with it scot-free. People thought that William was punished too harshly purely because he was a black man. All 12 people on the jury were white. William tried to appeal his sentencing, saying he was treated unfairly. The appeal was denied. His final words were, quote, "Thank those who tried so hard to keep me alive. I hope they continue to fight for equal justice after I'm gone. Tell my family goodbye and I love them," unquote. I'm all about equality, but in no way do I believe William was innocent in these crimes. I think he knew exactly what the intentions were. He may not have pulled the trigger, but the intent was to rob the store and kill those who got in the way. However, capital punishment in Utah is very rare. Since the year 1977, only 7 people have been sentenced to death, 2 of which were Dale Pierre and William Andrews. Not any murder charge will land you on death row. It must be considered aggravated murder. 2 things these men did qualified for the aggravated murder charges. One is the use of poison. The Drano might not have been what killed Michelle, Stanley, and Carol, but who's to say it wouldn't have eventually? I believe that was their intent. It was just taking too long, and Dale decided to shoot them. If Orrin and Courtney didn't receive medical attention, it's entirely possible they would have died from ingesting the Drano. Secondly, if a murder is committed during the course of another felony, as in sexual assault, kidnapping, or robbery. Sorry guys, you're checking all the boxes for aggravated murder. As to the other 3 men, they have never been identified. If you're enjoying Killer Stories, please leave me a review on Apple Podcast or Facebook. Yep, I'm back on Facebook. Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook is at Killer Stories Podcast. You can find me on Twitter at Killer Stories PC. Email story suggestions to KillerStoriesPodcast@gmail.com. You can support the show by making a one-time donation at buymeacoffee.com/killerstories. And like I said in the beginning, another way to help is shop my new merch store. teespring.com/stories/killer-stories-podcast. My link tree has everything I just named all in one spot, and it's posted in the show notes along with the source material. I have a new true crime podcast I think you might like. It's called Stolen From Me by Lindsay. She's another solo host from the United Kingdom. Stay tuned for a short trailer for her show. Until next time, this has been a killer story.
Hello and welcome to Stolen From Me by Lindsay, a true crime weekly podcast and YouTube channel. I've covered such cases as Molly McLaren, Susan Capper, and Gemma Hayter. Each week, we take a look at each individual case and try to bring as much awareness to it as possible. You can find me on all your favourite podcast platforms and YouTube at Stolen From Me by Lindsay. Thank you and see you all soon. Goodbye.